Hello fellow woodworkers, welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop from a very sunny United Kingdom, and in this week's video we're going to be putting dust extraction on my miter saw station. Roll the intro. So, you may have watched the last two video series on making my miter saw stand. If you haven't, I'll put a link in the description, but the stand is not 100% finished. The next project I've got is to build a hood for the stand, but before we do that, I thought it would be a good video just to show you how I'm going to go through, how I'm going to set up my dust gathering, my dust collection, dust extraction, and the way that I have connected the two units together. So there's quite a complicated little bit of goings on there. So I thought it would just be nice for a different sort of slightly different video just to show you how I've done it, how I've made it, and how I've connected it all up. But of course the first thing I've got to do is to make a hole in the back of this unit so I can run my cable through for the dust extraction. And then I'll just talk to you a little bit about how I've got the dust extraction to fit on my Evolution miter saw. Let's do that now. So I don't think I've shown you much of the back of the unit, but this is the back side. This is where the drawer is going to go, and I've put these metal plates here for two reasons. Number one, to help join the two sides to the top. That's the first thing. But the second reason is to make sure the drawer doesn't come any further than this part of the worktop that I've installed it on, because this gap here I have left specifically for my suction hose that's going to come through to attach to my Evolution table saw. Now, miter saw. Now, one of the problems that I had before, I was just using a bog standard domestic Titan Hoover shop vac really, and it just wasn't powerful enough, and I've actually blown the engine on it, and all it was connected to this. But part of the problem, and I have not done a huge amount of research, so I'm sure somebody will tell me in the comments if I'm doing this the wrong way, but for me the much smaller, thinner hose was a lot more difficult in terms of dust extraction. I think it put far too much pressure on the shop vac. I mean, the shop vac's not a really good way of doing it anyway, I appreciate that, but I think had the pipe been a bit bigger, it wouldn't have been such a bottleneck and such a powerful sort of suck motion, if you see what I mean. You're not going to see that you're not going to hear that in every woodworking video, are you? So what the plan is to do now, I've already got my my vacuum in here, and I'm going to just start by boring a hole through. I'm actually going to use a hole saw to do this, but I've done this now rather than when I was building the unit. And you might be thinking, well, why now? Why not when you were doing it? But I wanted to do it so that I made sure I've got all the tolerances and all the gaps that I need. So the plan is to put a hole here, run the pipe up, and connect it to the top. Now, to connect it to the Evolution miter saw, this has been a very long and complicated process. It's taken quite a long time. How I've done it is I've just made a number of sort of small black rings on my 3D printer, different calibers, all of them, different apertures, every one, just to get a size that fits on it, because it's quite an awkward fit because it's got an inner ridge. I did extensive research on the internet and I couldn't find anything that would match that and match my vac, having already previously made an adapter ring for my vac when I had it installed on my system that ran overhead. So I'm going to try that now, see if it fits. If it does, I'll connect the cable up and drill the hole. Let's do that now. So I started by marking roughly the size of the hole. I knew it was going to be bigger than this. I was going to enlarge the hole with my hole saw, which I did. I started by drilling one hole, and then I drilled another hole next to it, and I always planned to do something slightly different for opening it. I don't use my multi-tool enough, and I thought this would be a really good chance to use it. This is just the Parkside multi tool, and the set of blades that you can see, this is the saw attachment I actually got in this week's sale, and they were actually really good, and as you can see they're very sharp, but it took a little bit of fettling to get it the right size, and I found that the saw attachment was really good, but it just would not get into the corners 100%. So when I'd done most of it with that tool. I then switched to the sort of plunge saw. But the other thing was, it was really good on the battery. I did all of the cutting that you see in this video on a battery that had been charged about 3 weeks ago and just left. And it had loads and loads in it. It could have done a lot more than I'd done it. I did, off camera, I did extend the hole a tiny, tiny little bit, which you'll see in a minute when I go to put the pipe in. But overall, I was actually really impressed with how well it was able to cut through the plywood. And as you see there, I just went for the plunge saw, the plunge blade, sorry, just for the bits at the end, just to sort of get it off, which it did. And then I just used that to level up the hole, because obviously when I'd cut down with the hole saw, it sort of slightly gone into the wood below. So I just used that to take it off. But again, really impressed by the quality of those sets from Lidl. The next stage was to have a go at fitting the tube, which it's got a 3D printed collar on this end of the tube and the same on the other end, you'll see in a minute. It fit really nicely. After a bit of persuasion, I got that in, and when I connected it, I don't know why, I just didn't like it. I just didn't think it was right. I wasn't sure that the pipe was big enough. It fitted perfectly, but as you can see when I tested it, it sort of popped it out, and I just didn't, I don't know, I can't explain it. I just did not like it. So I thought, why don't I switch to the original gigantic hose that came with it? So that's what I did. So here I go. I'm just extending the hole a tiny little bit, because obviously the hose that comes with my shop vac is quite significant in size. I must measure it actually, but it's huge. It's the same width aperture as that hole that you can see on the shop vac there. So again, switchblade to the sort of smaller saw, more of a plunge saw, and eventually I managed to get it in. It was only the sort of copper bit that was catching on the end, and to be honest, by the time I got it in and fiddled around with it, I did like that much better. I know it's bigger, but I don't think that's an issue. I then went to prepare the station to go in, and when I moved the unit, I realised that I hadn't properly painted the floor. It's really good, this paint. I've got a video, if you look back through my back catalogue, I've got a video of using that garage floor paint. It was absolutely fantastic. With that done, I just attached a couple of pieces of cord, basically, and this was just to hold the pipe in place. Unfortunately, it didn't have quite the desired effect, as you'll see at the end when it was in place. One of them popped out, but I just used a couple of bits of cord, just burnt the ends to stop them sort of flanging out, and just used a little strip of metal that I also got from Parkside. It was one of like the flat brackets that they sometimes have in their sort of bits and bobs sale. So I had some of those lying around, and I thought, oh, perfect. And that's another reason why you should always pick up things like that in Aldi or Lidl if you're going, because you just never know when you're going to need them. And obviously I needed one here, and I thought, oh, I've got that. I know I've got it because I purchased it not that long ago in a little set. So I had them. Always handy to have things lying around the workshop, I think. So when I was happy with that and it was in the right place, I then took my plunge saw. Now I'm not entirely sure. This probably looks a lot dodgier than it actually was. I then took the plunge saw and I just took the edge of that unit off, because when I measured, it was just a little bit too wide for my unit to sit in it with the space that I had. So I very, very carefully cut out. I forgot to attach my hose, as you can see, and it took quite a long time for me to get rid of that dust. In fact, what I ended up doing was changing my Titan workshop vac from the suck to the blow, and I literally just blasted everything out, which was the only way, because you can see there's all dust stuck up the wall. Yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare decision, that. I then brought the desk round and offered it up, and it was at this point that I realised that I hadn't taken off the stop block, the piece of metal for the stop block. so there was no way that the new unit was going to fit in because it had an overhanging piece of metal, which meant I had to clear that entire unit that you can see. I took everything off of it, undid all of the bits of T-track to get it out the way so that I could make sure that the mitre station was able to fit, which thankfully it did. I also didn't realise how many screws I put in this. So it was in. I just then had to rearrange all the cables, of which there were many. I've got an on-off system. You might be able to see it on the wall there, on my remote, where I can switch the power socket on and off. So I'm wanting to make sure that I'd reinstated that and obviously put the mitre saw in as well. And then it was time for a test drive. And I am very, very pleased to say it worked very well. Just one thing I picked up on, which I'll talk about, and I think it's to do with those ridiculous nozzles, but what I'm going to do is 3D print a nozzle that comes out of the mitre saw and just joins straight into that batter connector. There's no need for all those little bits, but obviously I've only got access to a 3D printer at work and I was at home, but it worked and that was the most important thing. Okay, so as you can see, it's now finished, it's in place. Quite a few changes that I'd made from my original design. As you will have seen in the video, I originally was going to use a thinner, smaller pipe than this, and I'd 3D printed an end. The pipe wasn't long enough, but actually when I looked at the stepping down from here on the back, I thought, why don't I just use the original pipe, which is what I then switched to, which meant I had to enlarge the hole at the back. So that, I think, has worked well. The only thing that does slightly worry me, I have to be honest, is the amount of spill out from the saw coming from that pipe. And this cable, which is holding it at the back, has just popped out, which, to be honest, I think now it's in place, that isn't as much of an issue. I don't really need that there. And that one there is held fine. So just the amount that's there, I'm not sure I like this bit, to be honest with you. I like the fact it's got a wider pipe at the back, but I think what I might do there is just fabricate a different nozzle potentially on the laser printer, just make a different nozzle for it. But the good thing is it's all in place now, it's in its final position. Two little interesting things that I didn't notice. The first one, this is absolutely, the new unit is absolutely completely flat and exactly as it should be. And there's a massive gap here going all the way through to not a big gap there, which would naturally make you think this unit is not straight or not laying true, but it actually is. So that leads me to think that this is now not leaning true. But then when I put something on it, you can see nothing's rolling there, but there is quite a big gap, particularly at this end to that end, which of course means it's stopping the entire reason that I did this from being all one. Now this side, it actually goes down, but I've just leveled this and it's completely level. So I have to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what's happened there, but what I set out to do today was to put my dust extraction in. I've achieved that goal, which I'm very, very pleased about. One of the other things is I've noticed that my French cleat is hanging off of the wall. Now, I really took a long time and got that fixed in properly, but it's obviously leaning off. So that's a future project on the garage workshop, but I think I might combine that with a hood design that I'm going to do for this, and that will be in an upcoming video. So a bit of a sort of maintenance-y video more than making anything, but quite a lot of skills involved in that process. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's edition. I just want to give a bit of a shout out to last week's video on Maker Central. If you haven't had a chance to view it, I'll put a link in the description, but I had so many good comments and so many views on that. It's the biggest view film I've had for a long time. So a massive thank you to everybody who watched it. It also helped my subs go up. I'm up to about 920 at the time of filming this video. So a massive thank you to everybody who watched it. Don't forget, keep passing the channel on. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like and comment. I've got loads of back videos. I've got 120 videos in my back collection now. And if you are a regular viewer, thank you so much. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for the feedback. And also, don't forget to like and comment. Have a fantastic week, fellow woodworkers, and I'll catch you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care.